Come now, little listeners. Sit close. Let the ocean winds howl outside and the fire crackle low. Tonight, Papapage brings you a tale from the cliffs of California, where the mountains rise sharp above the sea and the fog comes crawling on silent feet. This is Big Sur, wild, beautiful, and not empty. People come for the view, the trails, the endless Pacific stretching like silver forever. But some don't come back quite the same. Some return with eyes too wide, voices too low, and some don't return at all. They saw something. They saw them. The locals call them the darkwatchers. Tall, silent, motionless. Figures that stand high on the ridges, cloaked in shadow, always at the edge of vision. They do not move. They do not speak. They only watch. Always watch. The Chumash people, who lived on this land long before it had a name like California, spoke of spirits in the mountains, tall beings that stood between worlds. They warned never to meet their gaze, never to greet them, never to follow when they vanish. Because once you follow, you don't always return. The Spanish settlers called them Los Vigilantes Oscuros, the Dark Sentinels. They saw them too, especially at dusk, especially when alone. One story comes from 1935, from a schoolteacher named Helen Long. She hiked the same trail every Sunday, a narrow ridge path overlooking the sea. One evening, she paused to rest, looked up, and saw a tall figure standing atop the next rise. Still as stone, cloaked, no face, no sound. She called out, thinking it was another hiker. It didn't answer. She looked away for just a moment, and it was gone. She laughed at first, told her class the next day, but she stopped hiking after that, closed her blinds at night, refused to walk alone. A year later, she left town without a word. Others have seen them since, ranchers, writers, travelers. Even John Steinbeck mentioned them once in a letter, calling them the Watchers, noting how they appeared just as the light began to fade. There's a pattern, see? The Dark Watchers appear at twilight. Never in full daylight, never in the dark. Only in that in-between moment when the sun slips low and the world forgets which side of night it belongs to. Some believe they are hallucinations, tricks of light and shadow. Others think they're echoes of something old, older than man, older than thought. And a few say they're not just watchers. They're judges, because now and then one of them vanishes, and so does someone else. So if you ever walk the cliffs of Big Sur as the sky turns amber, and you see a figure far above you, too tall, too still, don't wave, don't speak, and whatever you do, don't blink. Some say the Dark Watchers are harmless, that they only observe, that they never come close, that they never move. But that's only true until it isn't. In the spring of 1972, a man named Julian Rao moved into a small cabin near Lucia, deep in the Big Sur hills. He was a painter, known for two things, silence and solitude. Said the mountains gave him peace. Said he came there to forget. But something remembered him. Julian kept a journal, worn leather, filled with sketches and quiet thoughts. It's the only reason we know what happened. The first entry mentioning the Watchers was dated April 3rd. Saw a figure on the ridge, too tall to be a man, just watching, odd. beautiful in a way. April 10th. Moon. It's back. Same time. Same spot. No movement. Left apples on a rock nearby. Gone by morning. April 17th. Horny. There were 2 tonight. And then, April 20th. I waved. One lifted its arm, slowly, not quite right, like a puppet learning to mimic. That was the last full entry. Neighbors noticed the light in Julian's cabin stayed on for days, then nights, then nothing. A ranger went to check. The door was ajar, the cabin untouched, paintings everywhere, canvases stacked against the walls, covering the floor. All the same image, dark silhouettes standing on cliffs, each one closer than the last. On the final canvas, still wet, only one figure remained, standing just outside a window, watching. Julian was never found, but his journal remained, open to a torn page that read, "They don't like being seen, but they love being remembered." Since then, hikers have reported strange findings on the trail near Julian's cabin. Smooth stones stacked in spirals, trees carved with eyes, and once a sketchbook, weathered by rain, filled with new drawings in a hand no one recognized. No one recognized? All of them showed the same thing. A man standing among the watchers, not afraid, smiling. Some believe the dark watchers choose those who see them clearly, those who dare to acknowledge them, to invite them in. And when that happens, something changes. The figure on the ridge is no longer a stranger. It's a mirror. So if you see a watcher raise its hand, don't wave back. Because once you become part of their story, they never stop watching. And sometimes they invite you to stay. The fog in Big Sur doesn't drift. It creeps, low and slow, curling through the canyons like a living thing. It rolls in quiet, swallowing sound, swallowing time. And when it's thickest, when you can't see your own feet, that's when the dark watchers move. At least, that's what the old ranger, Tom Ellery, claimed. Tom worked the trails for nearly 30 years, never touched a drop of liquor, never chased ghost stories. But when his hair turned white and the mountains had taken his knees, he started talking. One story stuck with him, wouldn't let go. It was the autumn of 1984. A couple, Mason and Lily Devons, had gone missing near Cone Peak. They were seasoned hikers, left a map, marked their route, told friends they'd be back in 2 days. They never were. A storm had rolled in fast, thick with sea fog. Tom led the search team, found their trail, found their gear, found their tent, zipped and empty, still warm. No signs of struggle, no blood, just 2 things. Mason's boots, placed neatly on a flat rock, and a string of pinecones arranged in a perfect circle. As the search stretched into a second day, the fog deepened. Radios failed. GPS glitched. Tom separated from his team near the ridge. And that's when he saw them. 3 of them, tall, still, standing between the pines like statues draped in midnight. Tom said he didn't run. He couldn't. His legs locked, his voice failed, and the fog rolled tighter. One of the figures raised an arm, slowly, almost thoughtfully, not in greeting, but in warning. Then they vanished, not into the trees, into the fog, as if swallowed. When the fog lifted, Tom found himself back at base camp, with no memory of how he got there. The Devons were never found, but a week later, a hunter discovered something strange. A pine tree stripped of bark, every inch carved with spirals, and a single word burned into the trunk. Say. Now Tom's long retired, won't go near the hills, keeps every window covered, says he dreams of fog now, says he hears footsteps outside when it rains. He keeps a mirror by his bed, always turned to face the window, just in case they come to watch. Because the watchers don't live on the cliffs alone. Sometimes they come down. Sometimes they walk between the trees. And sometimes they leave the fog behind. There's a part of the Big Sur cliffs where birds don't sing, where even the wind quiets down. It's not marked on any map, no sign, no name, but hikers know it. They call it the Hollow, a sharp bend on the trail above the ocean, where the pines lean too far, and even the insects seem to vanish. And those who've stood there too long say the silence grows teeth. In 2003, a backpacker named Sonia Leclerc was making her way along the coastal ridge alone. She was experienced, smart, cautious, level-headed. She radioed in every evening, until one night she didn't. Rescue teams searched for 5 days. Clear weather, good visibility, nothing. Then, on the 6th day, a ranger found her journal. It was resting on a tree stump, perfectly dry despite the fog, open to the last page. The final entry. Something is standing in the silence. I can feel it watching, but when I turn, it becomes the mountain. They never found her body, but they found her tent, still zipped. Inside was a pair of boots, and between them, 2 pine needles arranged like eyes. Since then, that part of the trail has taken on a kind of reputation. Hikers report strange pressure there, headaches, ringing ears. Some say their thoughts echo, like they're being repeated back at them. One man claimed his shadow stopped moving just for a second. He turned and saw a figure on the ridge, identical to him. Same build, same big pack, just taller, too tall. Then the silence swallowed it whole. There's a theory that the dark watchers don't just observe. They remember, that they carry the echoes of those they've seen before, trapped in that terrible quiet. And when the hollow goes silent, it's not the absence of sound. It's the presence of something that doesn't need to speak, because it already knows your voice. There are photos, of course, blurry, warped, figures on ridgelines where no one was supposed to be, but they never show up twice, never the same shape, never quite human, and never alone. Sometimes hikers say they feel watched the entire way back to their cars, that their reflections in the windows don't match, that their eyes look older. Papapage has walked many trails in his time, but he never lingers in the hollow, because there's a silence that calls things back. And once you've been seen by it, once it knows your shape, it waits to see if you'll return. For years, folks said the dark watchers never move. They stand, they watch, then they vanish. But that's not the whole truth. Sometimes they do move. There's an old story passed between families in Big Sur. never written down, only spoken. It's called The Walkers in the Fog, not a bedtime tale, a warning. It begins with a woman named Estrella Navarro. In 1959, she lived alone in a small house near the edge of the cliffs. Her husband had died the year before, and she stayed on, tending the garden, living quiet. Until the lights came. Not bright lights, not headlights, not fire, but pale glows along the ridge. Soft, steady, like the horizon was breathing. Estrella watched them from her porch, at first with curiosity, then unease. Because each night they came closer. Not fast, not dramatic, just a few feet more. Slowly, patiently, until one night she didn't see the lights at all. She saw figures. Tall, still, hooded. 3 of them, standing just beyond the tree line across the meadow, close enough to see their height, easily 8 feet, close enough to know they weren't wearing robes, but were made of shadow. She locked the doors, closed the curtains, lit every candle she owned. But the next morning, every candle was out, and her garden was gone. Not trampled, not eaten. Gone. Only the soil remained, turned over, smooth. And in the center, a pile of polished stones, 7, stacked high. That day she walked into town, pale as paper, and never went back, told no one where she moved, left everything behind. But neighbors claimed the house wasn't empty afterward. They said lights moved behind the curtains at night, that sometimes in fog figures could be seen walking her porch, slow and soundless, until the porch collapsed from rot, and even then, footprints appeared. The dark watchers don't move for just anyone. They move when they've been invited. When someone stares too long, speaks their name, leaves offerings, or worse, asks questions. Because when you acknowledge them, they take notice. And once they notice, they come closer. Papapage says this: curiosity is the first step toward invitation, and when the tall ones walk, they do so for a reason. Not to frighten, to collect. So if you ever see the shape move, don't assume the wind is playing tricks. And if it steps toward you, you've already been seen. The dark watchers are known for the cliffs, the ridges, the places where sky meets stone. But once, just once, one was seen by the water. The story comes from 1994, from a ranger named Daniel Morse. He'd spent years patrolling the Big Sur coastline, knew every bend and bluff, every danger spot. But there was one cove he never liked. Locals called it Dead Drift. No boats ever docked there. Too rocky, too narrow, always shrouded in mist. One morning, Daniel was checking the shoreline after reports of a landslide. He hiked down the trail, past the twisted cypress trees, down toward the tide pools. And that's when he saw it. A tall figure standing on a flat stone just beyond the surf. It faced the ocean, cloaked, still. He called out, thinking it might be a stranded hiker. It didn't move. So he raised his binoculars, and what he saw made him freeze. The figure's cloak wasn't fabric. It shimmered like water held upright, reflecting nothing. No face, no features, just absence. And around its feet, the tide didn't touch. The waves split around the stone, as if afraid. Daniel lowered the binoculars, rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, it was gone. Only one thing remained, a circle of stones arranged on the shore, pointing out to sea. He backed away, didn't report it, but over the following weeks he returned, drawn by something he couldn't explain. Each time more stones appeared, more patterns in the sand, and one day carved into the bark of a lone cypress. We wash what you forget. A month later, Daniel quit the Rangers, moved inland, stopped speaking to friends. His last letter sent to a colleague read, "They watch from above, but one watches from below. It remembers the ones who see it." He was found weeks later, drowned in a river 30 miles from the coast. There was no sign of struggle, but in his jacket pocket, a seashell filled with black sand, and in his lungs, not water, but fog. Not all watchers stay on the cliffs. Some lean close to the waves. And if one ever turns from the sea to face you, don't look into its hood, because whatever watches from inside remembers what you were, and maybe what you were before. There's an old tale in Big Sur, one hardly spoken now, passed down like a secret between generations. It doesn't warn you about the watchers. It warns you about what happens when they stop watching. It begins with a man named Ray Torres. He was a poet, quiet, thoughtful, drawn to the cliffs like a moth to fire. In 2008, he rented a small cabin near Pfeiffer Ridge, planning to spend a season writing in peace. Instead, he found the ridge wasn't empty. Ray was the type to notice things others didn't. The way the fog sat too still some mornings. How the wind paused when he walked certain paths. And how, every dusk, a tall figure stood across the ravine, motionless, silent, as if carved from night. He didn't fear it. He wrote to it. Left pages of poetry on stones near the overlook, words about memory, about grief, about being seen. The figure never came closer, but it never disappeared either. Until one evening it did, and something in Ray broke. The next morning he walked into town, trembling, told the ranger at the outpost that the figure was gone, that it had left him. And then he said something stranger. "I'm alone now. Completely alone. It's worse than I thought." Ray stopped writing, stopped eating, sat on the porch for hours, staring at the ridge, waiting. Then one night, during a full moon, his neighbor heard a scream. Sharp, short, silence. When they investigated the next morning, Ray was gone. But his porch chair was still rocking, and on the railing beside it, drawn in soot, 2 eyes, closed. No body was ever found. Only his final poem, tucked beneath a stone at the overlook. They watched until I knew myself, then turned away, and I was less than nothing. Some believe the watchers don't simply observe. They hold something back, a silence, a space. And when they look away, when they leave you, it's not just their gaze that vanishes. It's you. Because to be seen by them is to be made real. To be unseen is to be forgotten. So, if you ever see a dark watcher on the ridge, and one day it's gone, don't smile. Don't celebrate. Because if they stop watching you, it means your time in this world is almost up.